在8月的 EP Podcast， 每周二的单元会来讨论如何跟不同的沟通风格来做沟通。跟以往不一样的，我们将着重在你该注意什么，还有如何做好心理准备。Hello， 欢迎来到 Executive Plus 主管与沟通力的 Podcast。I'm Sherry, an educator, certified coach, and style enthusiast.我相信专业有效的沟通是语言跟逻辑的完美结合。
And I'm Nick, a startup consultant, corporate trainer, and late-night gaming junkie. I believe great communication requires the right mindset and solid frameworks.
我们希望带给大家职场英语的技能、跨文化沟通技巧与其他能帮助您成为出色领导者的工具。
Join us each week as we share our experience, research, and methodologies to take your communication and language skills from good to great. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Executive Plus podcast. This month, we're diving deeper into social styles. And we wanted to start off a few episode series looking at how do you prepare yourself to talk to a certain style. So today, we're going to dive into not only how do you communicate with an expressive, but what kind of mental preparation or preparation game do you need to have in order to get ready to have a more effective conversation with an expressive.
没错，今天的单元就是来探讨如何跟 expressive 来做沟通。As an expressive myself, it's gonna hurt a little. 但是今天我要来分享我的 weakness 是在哪里，还有呢，如何去做一些心理的准备，尤其是当你要讲到一些比较 difficult conversation.
For those of you who need a refresher or are a bit newer to our podcast, to get a more comprehensive overview of the expressive style, go back to episode 229 and definitely check out the most recent episode 302 to understand the two dimensions that we're going to dive in a little more. Even for those who haven't taken the test or not familiar, you should be able to spot out the expressive style from the way we talk about it today.
So just a little recap.Expressive 也就是表现型的人啊，他的 a lot of hand gestures, they like to talk to people, they appeared to be quite communicative and inspiring, and also they're quite emotional at times. I'm not saying that they're just, completely full of emotion, but they're definitely more emotional than other styles. 那我们今天就先来分享一下哪一些是他们的 key traits， 也就是在沟通上面你一定要注意什么。
For those following along in episode 302, an expressive is high on assertiveness, which means they are more tell-oriented, and they are high on responsiveness, which means they are much more open in showing their emotions, and they can also use their emotions as part of control or part of inspiration.
So I'm going to talk about the 3 things that everyone needs to know when you're talking to an expressive. Expressive 呢，我们非常的喜欢spontaneous, 我们也特别的 impulsive. And I think spontaneous and impulsive, there's like a very thin line, right? Spontaneous can be good, 就是非策划安排的。我们有的时候喜欢去做一些事情，或者通常有时候是 follow the gut. 但是呢，有的时候又会非常 impulsive, 也就是比较冲动的。
So as Sherry said, expressives tend to follow their gut.They tend to follow their intuition, which means that they get a sense of how something is going, whether it is the information they have or, more importantly, it's the vibe they feel in the room. What an expressive can do, especially if they're very good on that responsiveness side, they're very good at using their emotions in the right ways. Like you can throw an expressive up on a stage with no preparation and they'll usually be fine. Like they can get away with it. And some people may mix that with, say, extroversion, but it's really not. It actually just has more to do with they like that feeling of both being a center of attention, but also because they can follow their intuition, they can usually read a room and then they have enough information to just go with it. So if you're ever like in a pinch and there's like a sudden Q&A or a sudden presentation, if you know an expressive, just toss them up stage. They'll usually be fine.
Now the downside is that when there's a very difficult situation, 或者是 压力突然间来的时候，有的时候 expressive 无法做一个非常理智的一个决定。
So this is where that impulsive comes in there, which is sometimes they'll make a decision, but just depends on where their mood is. If they're in a really good mood, that can be spontaneity, that can be very positive. If they're not in the right place, they can just like feel the pressure and then just like make all these decisions, but there doesn't seem to be like a solid logic. It doesn't seem to have a direction. And so it's just like, I don't know what's happening right now.
And now the second key trait, and this is going to hurt a little, but expressive need personal approval or validations from others.
And this is back to that very high responsiveness. Not only are they more open with their emotions, they are also a lot more affected by having emotional needs met or not met, which means expressives as a whole do thrive on validation. They do thrive on approval. And so a lot of times when they're taking a center of attention, they need that feedback. If they don't get that feedback, it starts a loop of either seeking personal approval, even to a negative point, or they start questioning themselves and their mood will switch because they're not seeing how that relates to what they're doing.
Yeah. Now, the third key trait would be, now this is a little confusing, even for myself, is that 我们通常是比较 goal-oriented, but not detailed-oriented.
This is a really interesting, I won't say contradiction, but it's something from the outside that's a little hard to understand. One thing we'll talk about is when you're talking to an expressive, you need to give them room to think out loud. And you have to be prepared to answer questions that give them more context or give them more information. So expressives like a lot of brainstorming. They enjoy a lot of back and forth conversation. But just because they get more information from these conversations doesn't mean they make decisions based on this information. So they like to talk about big goals, big visions, how to get to the future. And they like all the brainstorming and conversation and thinking out loud that goes with it. But they may not follow any of it. Yeah. They may just go that gut intuition and they must do what they want, but they still need the conversation.
Right. So having said that, let's talk about what you should do to mentally prepare to have a difficult conversation or in kind of a emotionally charged situation with an expressive. 第一个我觉得非常重要的就是 you need to be centered first. 跟 expressive 讲话，尤其是在很多压力之下呢，他们真的会比较 emotional. And I like this. They may get a little bit disoriented and disorganized. 我觉得这个是 yeah, I mean, Nick is laughing right now because he's afraid to nod his head.
I'm just smiling big and saying nothing.
So tell me how I could be so disoriented sometimes.
Well, take a quick step back and talk about where this comes from. Because expressives are on the extreme side of both assertiveness and responsiveness, expressives' emotions tend to control a situation, not just for themselves, but they can easily influence a room. Now, the positive side of that we've covered before is they can be incredibly inspirational. That passion, that drive, that enthusiasm for something can just bring an entire room with them. But it also means that they can go the total opposite. So it means that when you're walking into a situation with an expressive, it's going to be a roller coaster of emotions. The example I love to give of this is I have literally been in meetings where the CEO was like the top iceberg tip of an expressive. And throughout a 10-minute conversation, and conversation I put in quotes, no one else talked this entire time. We presented two ideas to the CEO. The CEO talked himself into and out of changing his direction out loud in 10 minutes with no one else talking. Like he got really excited about a new direction and then he started being like, oh, here are all the problems with that and that would lead to all these issues, and then like talked himself out of it and then came back to the conclusion to modify something slightly but mostly stay in his original direction. No one else spoke during that 10 or 15 minute segment. He just talked out loud. And so what this means is if you're not centered and ready for that, you will follow their roller coaster. Yeah. They will get like super excited about something. You'll get super excited about something. And then something may come up and they will get super negative about it. Or they'll really not like something. Or again, back to that personal approval. They will not feel people are in tune with them and they'll get upset about it. If you follow that roller coaster, especially as someone who is very expressive or very authoritative in their position, you can get very off balance. And that's because that person can also get very off balance.
Exactly. So, I mean, even for myself, 当我要跟其他 expressive 做沟通的时候，我都要先做一点点 I mean, you can say meditation, 但是可能就是稍微静坐一下，先把自己的心情调整一下，然后有一个心理准备，就是他可能等一下会非常 emotional， 他可能会说一些话是他不应该说的话。It could be certain words that just doesn't sound very nice, and you just have to make sure that you are centered and you know what you want from that conversation, or else 你真的会被影响。那这个被影响有的时候他已经到了不知道从哪一个世界到另外一个世界，你可能还被他影响当中。So definitely really important is that be centered and don't absorb a lot of that negative emotion.
So the other thing that Sherry had talked about, which is getting disoriented. When expressives are under a lot of pressure and they go to that negative place, they may start making impulsive decisions based on how they feel at that moment. So if they feel everything is down, they will just start making these decisions or deciding things that are not the right direction for them, or let's say your team or your company, because of where they are. And if you just follow that and you don't realize that they themselves are not in the right place to make those decisions. If they're in a very great place, that spontaneity can be great. They can follow gut intuition. They can see an opportunity no one else sees. But when they're in that low place, if you are not centered, they are disoriented when they're making those decisions. Those decisions are not being made in the right state of mind. They're made under pressure. And if they don't have a way to center themselves, they can easily take the room. So if you're not centered, let's just say you have a really difficult conversation with your boss or a family member who's a super expressive, they will pull you with them because that's part of their communication behavior.
And one thing you have to understand is that 当他讲完了可能一些不太好听的话，或者是 after they're being very disoriented, they may forget about that. They may just come back once they recuperated, right? So sometimes you don't really need to take it to heart of what they've said because they may not even remember what they said.
Yeah, expressives can be an emotional etch-a-sketch. Yeah. If any of you grew up in the 80s, the little red thing where you can draw pictures and then shake it and it disappears. An expressive may have a doomsday report on Monday. By Tuesday, something positive happens and they have no idea what happened or remember the context for Monday and they're fine. But if you're another style, let's say especially an amiable, you may have taken that to heart.
Yeah.
And then come in Tuesday like, oh, everything is terrible. And the expressive's fine. So this is back to really kind of centering yourself. And the reverse is true. Is like if they get super excited, you may not want to follow that train. You can also feel positive. You can also feel excited, but you also don't want to get dragged into like something that's unreasonable just because you're following someone's excitement. So centering yourself matters here.
Then the next thing we wanted to talk about is how do you actually communicate with an expressive, knowing that all these different traits that we talked about. So we mentioned that expressive love these positive feedback and validation. 非常简单的 say some nice things. When expressives are feeling down, expressives are feeling very emotional, give them a little bit of validation. That always help.
Right. So sometimes it's as simple as going, thank you for that information. It's really insightful. I'll go back and think about it. Or we really appreciate you being part of this meeting and sharing your experiences with us. That kind of validation will make them feel like, oh, I have been heard. And that may seem unnecessary, but the reverse is if an expressive does not feel heard, if they do not feel there is approval or affirmation, they may start seeking it. And they may start seeking it in a very negative way, which is, say, dragging a meeting longer or changing the topic just so that they can be the center.
And being passive aggressive.
Yes.
Passive aggressive 中文就是比较被动攻击，可能说啊没关系啦，我就是不重要啦 that kind of thing, you know, oh, it's fine, I'm okay, it's really not that important, but you know that it is really important. That kind of thing because expressive want that attention. And this is definitely not a good way to get attention, but because they're just under a lot of stress, so again, they're coming out with like a very impulsive way of getting that attention.
So something as simple as words of affirmation, which if you look through our catalog we've talked about before, just giving someone approval, giving someone affirmation, or even like highlighting an idea that they have had and giving them credit, whether that idea is central to everything or not. It's enough for them to go, oh, okay, people heard me. And then they can continue through the conversation.
Now, the next thing, I know it's a bit weird. We talked about expressive being someone who may agree to a goal, but may not actually agree to all the details and the process. 但是呢，当你在 present 给 expressive 的时候呢，你还是要提供给他所有的 detail 跟所有的 context.
Something we covered before, expressives like brainstorming. They like having sounding boards. They like the conversation because they like to think out loud or they like to interact with people. When they are not given that opportunity, that's actually pressure for them because they don't feel connected. They don't feel like they understand all the context. So they may not make decisions based on these details, but two things have to happen. One, you need to give expressives more context and more details when you're presenting to them. Two, you need to leave room for them to talk, give feedback, or brainstorm with you.
Right.
If you go into a presentation, we're going to say driver style, which we'll cover later, and go key point A, key point B, here's the decision I want to make. If you do that to an expressive, they will be extremely unhappy because they will feel, one, I don't have enough information. Two, I didn't get to give any feedback.
Right.
I didn't get to talk. Yeah. So when communicating with expressives, you need to give more information. You need to leave time to ask for more feedback.
Right. So simply say, hey, do you have any questions so far? Tell me what you're thinking right now. Simply saying, tell me what you're thinking right now. 但这个时候你要注意，当你在做 presentation 的时候，可能 expressive 会问你很多问题，有很多的问题他可能自己就会回答了。They will answer themselves. They may not be in a question for you to even answer.
Yeah. So you can go into QA and they can ask you a question and then answer that question. Or if you identify someone as an expressive, even if you answer the question, the first thing you should go back and be like, but I would love to hear your experience. Because that's what they really want to do, is they want to be able to let their own ideas out.
And of course, because an expressive, we're not someone who take in logically a lot of information and process them and make decisions. So you can actually help an expressive to express more logically by asking specific questions. So this is actually coming from my experience with Nick. You asked me all the time these very logical questions like, you know, could you give me more examples? When you say this, what do you mean? Can you elaborate? Could you tell me what exactly that you want to see at the very end of the project? 尤其是像这样子类似的问题，可以帮助 expressive 去想清楚，要不然他们真的是完全就是 follow 他们的 intuition.
Right. There are often times where that intuition is correct. But part of the difficulty of working with an expressive on a team with other styles is other people may not understand that tuition. Whether it's correct or not, they don't know how to take action on the gut feeling that an expressive has. So you need to be a very good interviewer to ask the right questions. But there's a balance between if you ask the question why a lot, expressives get very upset.
Yeah, how dare you ask me why?
Yeah, like why? Why would you want to do that? Why is the right way? So you have to be very careful if your question comes across as challenging. And so just why tends to come across very challenging. But back to if you ask them for their experiences, if you ask them for examples, if you ask them what they would like to do next, you can build a road for them to share their process because they can think out loud and they're happy to share. But if you go into interrogation why mode, it goes horribly bad.
Right. And one really good coaching question that I've learned before is that you could ask an expressive, oh, have you encountered similar experience before? Could you tell me more about that? 所以他们通常还蛮喜欢讲一些他们一些过往的一些事情啊 another story they could share. So have them to just talk through the process and you may actually get your answers throughout.
The last tip we have when it comes to communicating with an expressive is with expressives, you need to be flexible with your deadlines.
Oh, what do you mean by that?
This is because on that high responsiveness side and also that spontaneity and following their gut intuition, if an expressive is very excited about something, they may give you very unreasonable deadlines, meaning they'll be so excited about it, they think they can get it done right now because they're on that high of the energy. But when it comes down to, again, the detail-orientedness, sitting down, planning everything out, making sure everything is right, that deadline that they said they have is not quite true. So when communicating, be flexible. Maybe one of those things, if you say, I need it by Monday, probably you should need it closer to like Wednesday or Friday. Simply because you need to let that person process. 2, brainstorming, thinking out loud, using other people as a sounding board is necessary for the expressive's own process. So that means that they need other people to work with. They need another team to feel that energy. So that takes time. It can be a great thing. It means expressives can be great collaborators. It means that they can be really good at pulling teams together, but they need time to do that in order to be the most effective. So they may in their head go, oh, I can execute this. I'm ready. I'm passionate. Let's get it done by Tuesday. You need to take that with a grain of salt.
Right. So speaking of being flexible with time, 我觉得这个也是一个很好的 trick.When, let's say you're getting ready to go out to like having dinner or a movie, you could actually give an expressive a slightly different or cheat on the time frame. 你可以稍微移动，比如说你真的10点20分得离开家里，那你就说10点钟。We need to get ready by 10. Because very likely, 当我们心情很好的时候，我们会觉得, it's fine. I have all the time in the world. And I may just take that extra 10 minutes of time. So I think this is could be a really good tip for you guys.
We hope you enjoyed this tip along with the others we discussed before. Definitely check out the show notes where we lay out the things we discussed, both how do you prepare yourself to talk to an expressive and what tips and tricks do you need to have a more effective communication with expressives. Join us as we explore the other styles. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
The Executive Plus podcast is a Presentality Group production, produced and hosted by Sherry Fang and Nick Howard. You can search us on Facebook, 主管英文 Executive Plus. You can also find us on Instagram, Communication R&D, and email us at sherry@epstyleplus.com.